All right, everybody, we're going to get started. If you want to find a seat, get comfortable. If you're leaning in the back and you like leaning in the back, that's lovely. But also, you're very welcome to come sit on the floor up here. There's lots of floor space. I think that spot by the fireplace is really nice. That's currently available, so I invite you to take a little time to settle in. If you don't have a chair and you need a chair, I think that we are currently all out, but I encourage you to feel empowered to ask someone who is seated if you can have their seat, and if they need that chair, I bet somebody nearby will be able to pass their chair to you, so let's take a moment to just settle in and find spots that feel comfortable for our evening ahead together. Cool. All right. My name is Laura Henriksen. I'm the program director here at the Poetry Project, and I am extremely delighted to be with you all this evening to celebrate the publication of this beautiful, beautiful book, She Follows No Progression, a Theresa Hak Kyung reader. Before I turn it over to Wendy's Subway, our beloved collaborators, and to the contributors to guide us through the evening, I just have a few reminders and updates about the space. There are 2 all-gender restrooms located upstairs and 2 more here on the first floor, but that is through Dance Space, and they have a performance right now, so we'll have to, if you need access to their restroom, just find me and I will get you over there. It's really lovely to be with you this evening. We have a lot of exciting stuff coming up in May that I would love to see you again for, so let me just tell you some upcoming events. We're back on Monday for readings by Fulla Abdul-Jabbar and Tillman Alexander Goldsboro, which is going to be a wonderful event. Then on Wednesday, we'll hear from Emily Johnson and Cutwolf Eileen Miles, which I'm so excited for. And then on Sunday, we get to collaborate with Wendy's again for an event that I've been looking forward to for some time, the marathon reading of Questions to Ask Before Your Bat Mitzvah. So that's Sunday. How else do you want to spend Mother's Day? It's perfect. So we'll start around 4. We'll go into the evening, and that'll be in the sanctuary, the larger space. So we'll see you for that again soon. I think that is everything from me, so I'm really glad to turn it over now to Rachel Valinsky and Chuan Chu to introduce the rest of the evening. Cool. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for the launch of She Follows No Progression, a Theresa Hak Kyung reader. My name is Rachel Linsky. I'm the artistic director at Wendy's Subway and the co-editor of this book with Chuan Chu, who's associate editor at Wendy's. For those of you who don't know us, Wendy's Subway is a nonprofit reading room, writing space, and independent publisher based in Brooklyn. And it's a real honor to be here tonight at the Poetry Project, which is such a beloved space for us, and really a kind of sister institution launching this volume. She Follows No Progression landed in New York on Friday. Thank you, Tellen, for retrieving this book from the Navy Yard, unloading a pallet, and bringing books in your car to Manhattan. This book marks the culmination of a multi-year project for us, which began in winter 2021 with a reading group of Theresa Hak Kyung's dictée. We spent much of the next year thinking with Cha, her work, and her legacy as part of our series, The Quick and the Dead, which is a programming and research initiative at Wendy's, dedicated each season to extended reflection around the work of a single artist or author by bridging their life, practice, and legacy to that of contemporary practitioners. And in its 3rd year, the program focused on the Korean-American artist Theresa Hak Kyung and considered her profound interventions in film and video, historiography, language and translation, and autobiographical writing. From March through June 2022, we hosted a series of 4 seminars led by writers, scholars, and artists working in her lineage and addressing the entangled political concerns of her work. These seminars, which were titled Through the Screen, Moving to Mouth to Moving Image, Migration and Memory, Embodied Histories, Mother Tongues Between Translation, and Biomythography, Epic Fabulation, Fragmented Narratives, opened up incredibly generative conversations and opportunities for thinking alongside Cha, and animated the creative and pedagogical potential of her practice in the present. The program also encompassed other engagements. We had a screening program in partnership with EAI, 2 artist commissions with TJ Chin and Suna Kim, a window installation at Printed Matter, and a marathon reading of her seminal book, Dictée, at the Whitney Museum. And I want to thank all of those organizations, as well as the Berkeley Art Museum and the Pacific Film Archive for supporting this project throughout in all its iterations that led us to this book. So today we carry Cha with us as we celebrate this publication with so many contributors to the book who were able to join us tonight, and with all the readers past, present, and future of Theresa Hak Kyung Cha. We'll be hearing tonight from Sunny Iyer, Jed Munson, Yubin Kang, Sariri Moses, Anton Hogan, Valentina Jager, Tran, Yves Tong Wen, Saang Yun, Irene Shu, Flo Lee, Marian Chunovsky, and Andrew Young-Hoon Lee. And we also want to thank all of the contributors who couldn't join us but who have participated in this book through essays, poems, artwork, and various other kinds of texts. Sam Cha, Jessie Chun, Yuna Chung, Eun-Sung Kim, Yuna Kwok, Jennifer Kwan Dobbs, Jennifer Gayong, Lee, Sujin Lee, Victoria Pitek Tong, Brendan Shimoda, Katrina Stamu, and Megan Saang Yun. And before reading from our editor's note and turning it over to the rest of the program, I just want to share a few more thank yous because this was really a collaborative project, many years in the making. And to get to this place, first I want to thank the Poetry Project for hosting this launch tonight, especially Laura, who has been knocking on our door for a while, asking when this book was coming out and when we could do this program, and moving it as we faced production delays. So thank you so much, Laura. Thank you to Anna, Will, and Roberto, and everyone who are running the program tonight. I also want to thank Claire Zhang, who designed the book, this really beautiful book that we finally have, and Patrick Yang McDonald for his design assistance. And with that, I will turn it over to Juan.
Thanks, Rachel. I'll be sharing from our editor's note before we get started with the readers quickly. She Follows No Progression, a Theresa Hak Kyung Cha reader, takes its title from an excerpt of Dictée, where a nondescript she is observed in an empty theater. The text describes her seated at the cinema, suspended between the darkness of the room and the vastness of the screen. Observation quickly turns inward, toward a space withheld from time and memory. This is a quote. She follows no progression, in particular of the narrative, but submits only to the timelessness created in her body. Ancient, refusing banishment, refusing to die, the already faded image, its decay and dismemberment rendering more provocative the absence. She remains for the effect induced in her, fulfilled in the losing of herself, repeatedly to memory, and simultaneously its opposition, the arrestation of memory in oblivion, regardless, over and over, again, for the time being. Much cinema traffics in narrative, through the progression of the plot and presumption of causality, through visual tropes that lend psychological depth to characters, through the projective mechanisms that produce viewer disidentification. Against the narratives carried by the screen, and perhaps against the purported linearity we find also in literature, in the telling of history, all of which Cha repeatedly refuses to submit to throughout her writing, the unnamed she is seen to be arrested by her own feeling, preoccupied by what concerns her body. She is located in the embodiment that language only ever and ever so inexhaustibly allows us to glimpse. Through language between parentheses, in letter forms that a period cleaves or opposes, and in the spaces that are never only gaps, but also resonant and replete spaces and silences, there is a priority of feeling. A shedding of the logic that governs the tongue, the body, the many lives lived under colonization, a return to what exists before memory, before the inscription of language and the loss of time. From this passage, for which Cha offers the title Memory, we draw a vision we carry forward into the collection of texts and artworks assembled in this book. A vision that hovers between darkness and expanse, between absence and presence, between resolve to remain and the entropic pull of oblivion. What surfaces is the descent from what is given to us as truth, an outline for how we may begin to imagine ourselves differently against the current of colonial forms, and a renewed attention to how we must touch, feel, speak, and think through our bodies and in relation. She follows no progression, is a collection of works unruly and singular in their criticism, testimony, and form. Each engagement, sustained in a text or elaborated in visual form, evinces a relation to Theresa Hak Kyung, her life, her work, that is at times personal and troubling, unresolved often, yet undeniably formative to the subjects at hand. Invoking in a vast constellation of subjects and genres, from the familial, friendship, death, family, genealogy, to the literary, memory, language, translation, the visual, performance, film and video, the political, race, gender, empire, mythology, colonialism, revolution, trauma, and history. They animate the subjects present in Cha's own body of work into a dialogue. Eschewing anything so much as progression, the book is nevertheless loosely ordered by sections of contributions that resonate together and paced by the sonic drawings of Andrew Yong-Hoon Lee. A first grouping cues us into an epistolary position from the I to the U, as a knot formed by the mother tongue, language, nationality, identity, and the familial come into view. Experiments in language and translation unravel such concerns and present new questions, shifting to the conditions that enable such entanglements, how they are foremost a question of politics, a symptom of the colonial present. We move toward the materiality of the book, of the screen, arriving at Cha's moving image work, and to the life of the object burdened by history. As we crawl out of the screen to the dirt of the earth, we are finally greeted by other stories, memories that echo past the confines of the present. Though there is no progression, there is infinite movement. What has concerned Cha continues to agitate, move, and shape us, as attested to by the voices gathered here. Language was most importantly a medium for Cha, a space in which the self is undone and rewritten through undoing word itself. Cutting up words until they become matter, only sound. In the debris of language, she looked for herself. In what she left behind, we look for ourselves once more. There is no order, only movement away from what keeps us stagnant. This is a collection of works restlessly in motion, in relation, gravitating toward and away from each other. From all directions, we return toward its silence.
So we have a stacked lineup tonight with a number of contributors sharing about 5 minutes of their work. And we've also asked each contributor to introduce the next so that we don't have to keep coming up here, and also so that they can welcome each other. So our first reader tonight is Sunny Iyer, who is the program director at Wendy's Subway, and who also wrote the foreword to the book. Sunny.
Let me bring it down. Hi, everyone. There are so many of you. And I'm really grateful to be here, and I'm beyond grateful to be a part of Wendy's Subway. I'm so lucky to be with you guys all the way through. And I'm excited to be here to celebrate the culmination of this enduring collective study of Theresa Hak Kyung. Today I'm going to read some excerpts from my foreword and weave them into some more contemporary and maybe urgent observations. I began writing this foreword on the evening of the summer solstice last year, a whole year ago. And the subtle auspiciousness of the longest day of the year. Exactly 2 weeks before then, the sky here was a burnt, dense orange from wildfire smoke, and the day after began the edge of a new tropical storm that flooded the city. If I've learned anything from Theresa Hak Kyung, it is that time transforms us all into sieves. Yet spending time with her work is an antidote to the relentless violence of everyday life. It requires us to slow down, to pay attention to the way our mouth contorts words. Cha dissolved the boundaries between genre. A letter was a film, and a film was a poem. In stringing together the many overlapping themes in Cha's writing and the writing inspired by her in this book, I asked, what do we lose to time, and what do we gain from paying attention to its contours? The project was conceived in 2021 amidst a peak of the COVID-19 pandemic at a time when many of us were preoccupied with the uncertainty of life itself. The speed of the city was slowing down, and the screeching flares of its brakes are what propelled our reading group to form. And we read excerpts of dictées aloud to each other each week, shared overlapping and unfinished bibliographies, all of which ultimately renewed our perspectives on unrelated and ongoing projects. The temporality of Cha's work, of her fascination with bending time, feels enmeshed with the temporality of the genocide we're currently witnessing. Language feels blatantly insufficient, and mass death is at warp speed. I returned to Theresa Hak Kyung with a distinct sense of relief. Her work constantly renews itself. She broke down the ways in which imperialism inscribes the body and how it alienates us from understanding ourselves. She wrote letters to martyrs, to herself, to her deceased ancestors, and through this act of writing and looping, she grieved. This fleetingness of understanding cuts across all the texts in this collection. Poet Brandon Shimoda puts forth an outline for future thinking and an homage to the epistolary form as one way to understand the grammar of memory. We also see this in Jennifer Kwan Dobbs's letters, in which her committed approach to autobiographical narrative establishes the act of writing as a dialectical engagement between the erasure of the self and its reconstitution. The letter transforms abstraction into intimacy. It also begs the question of who we write for and who we write to. Quote, "You are the audience. You are my distant audience. I address you as I would a distant relative, as if a distant relative, seen only, heard only through someone else's description," which is from Audience Distant Relative in 1977, which is an amazing mail art piece that then becomes this artist book. Multiple contributors to this book describe Cha's 1974 film Secret Spill, in which she very slowly unzips two large cloth bags, revealing and then spilling out masses of earth. The camera work is haunting and durational, rarely zooming out for the spectator to even understand what she's regarding, what she's looking at. And these cloth bags full of earth are like funerary shrouds, and the film's rupturing of sound, language, and shape becomes an allegory for subjectivity produced by colonial violence. So much of Theresa Hak Kyung's artistic career was dedicated to thinking about exile and martyrdom. Whose grief is ours? When does exile become refuge? How must we honor our martyrs? Grief is a through line when thinking about Cha, both because of her murder and because of how her work demands a reflection on the spectacle of oppression. She writes with clarity about the ethnic cleansing of Korea under the Japanese regime. Dictée tells a story of the martyr Yu Kwan-soon, a 16-year-old revolutionary who in 1919 formed a resistance group with other students to protest the occupation. And Cha places Soon in the same shrine with Joan of Arc, Persephone, and the countless unnamed women who found ways to reconstruct their own death into political struggle and refuse passivity. Cha writes about linguistic hegemony, the institutional apparatuses that facilitated her access to French and Latin but estranged her from her own mother tongue. In The Monolingualism of the Other, 1966, Jacques Derrida famously writes, "Je n'ai qu'une langue et ce ne l'est pas la mienne." I have but one language, yet that language is not mine. At the same conference at which this essay was first delivered, Edouard Glissant presented on the right to opacity. And these two texts, which remain as poetic and political as ever, provide an alternative route towards emancipation, one that's uncompromising and does not yield to co-optation and assimilation. In Yoon Sung Kim's incredible essay in the book, she writes, "Language reminds us again and again, the wound forgets the scar." Above all, Theresa Hak Kyung was a student and spent much of her life around UC Berkeley. Though her practice is singular, even at times lonely, she was surrounded by a community of artists, publishers, and friends who supported her work across many years. She was both a visionary and deeply attuned to an approach to experimentation that has come to define the era in which she made art. Cha lived through the political unrest of the 60s and 70s in Berkeley, witnessed the import of post-structuralist critique from France to the States, and dedicated her life to the study of experimental film history and Korean colonial and post-colonial history. In this revolutionary moment right now, I look to Cha and find an opaque, steadfast artist who committed herself to exploring the antagonism between legibility and self-expression. If ideology is what forces us to turn around and to respond to the hail, then Cha's work, I think, holds up a mirror to this scene of capture and stares back at empire. She asks us to consider the role of the poet in the revolution, but she doesn't reply with an easy answer. Over the course of this whole series, we've been asking ourselves, how do we remember Theresa Hak Kyung for who she was, not who we want her to be? And this book feels like a very precious act of remembrance, one that doesn't linger in the sensationalizing of her death, but rather celebrates all that she contributed to the fields of experimental feminist cinema, artist books, male art, poetry, and performance. And with that, I will introduce the next reader. The next reader is Jed Munson. Jed Munson wrote the poetry chapbooks Newsflash Under Fire, Over the Shoulder, Silts, Minesweeper, and Portrait with Parkinson's. He is the author most recently of Commentary on the Birds, out from Rescue Press in 2023.
Hey, there's a lot of people here. Thank you to the Poetry Project. Thank you to Wendy Subway. Thank you to the other contributors and everyone for coming out. This is a beautiful book. It also smells really nice. Take a sniff. Yeah, I wrote this poem, you know, in several stages. It's passed through a lot of spaces, sort of installationally, I would say. But it's for my sister Olan, who led me to Cha's work many years ago now. And actually, weirdly enough, the summer solstice, which is her birthday, we were in Mongolia doing research on migratory cranes. And we talked about Cha when we got lost on the way back from, we were like driving around the steppe in, you know, a very remote region. And we got lost when the sun set, finally. Almost like we weren't expecting it, right? And we just kind of decided to like stop panicking, and so we all like stopped the car and we just talked about different things, and we spoke about Cha. And one of the principles I remember, you know, that my sister was expounding from her readings, that I've observed in my readings since across different, you know, mediums of Cha's body of work, is this way that as something approaches its disappearance, it also appears to approach its concreteness, right? And there's this very precarious moment that Cha arrives at, or almost arrives at, you know, perennially, so, you know, it seems. And that was really interesting for me as I was viewing the film novel White Dust from Mongolia in the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Archive with my sister when I wrote this. And then the workshop participants from The Quick and the Dead in 2022 sort of returned me to the work and gave a beautiful occasion to be there again. So thank you for that journey, and I'll stop talking and read. This is called Two Lines Arc. Rove, round of lefts, the lifted panoramics in a sky of roofs, pots of potted resources, stacked, returning the cluster shamble brace to the luminary long unfastened, the evergape in residence, air signs, hand off the scurry to the city-bound cloth, a cloth-bound stain held in no one, could be light anywhere, the fade to, and from the invisible changing cloaks, fade of shade, turning points, to fades of habitual seeming, cutoffs become a center's marked substitution, unpowered courts sport plans for fissions, once shades regulated stenciled wind, since vacated for a crimped net, a forced subvention, exposing what is withheld against, but the guess at tracked rotation, the unmade unit, the estuary heading for a speed to settle into, the nearness of, the end of any thing, tiers of grass shoot likenesses, may be ringed in the silence of the vowel, wrung in half, part of a fixture, built to function as a filler theory, all of one of her hands, her brother rotating, looks like uzok. Two tunnels inspiring one entropic freightliner to the statement, say the foreside of grip, with the option to split, spilt, or combine, be walked along, be commercialized, while the rest of the segments sag under agreements covered logs, interventions of here and there now, voice box work, pines, the many privates, winter in sun like somewhere, I walked into the found nature of. Its warning, the beach light of a left heat source from re-entering mammalia, a new angle on the homeboundward, inching, a new dream of met glade. Wait for the platform to rise from its conspicuous slate, the other time gone as if boarded, files of old honesty, tagged by meeting landing's need and approaching the new multiplier, wants of water, the switchback always possible to miss a second time, stepping off into scene, spliced by returning, heading for some principle of decantation, then time as an orthodoxy, but one disobeys, inspiring a new train of behavior, leaving for the other, loosened placements shortly after bodies corrugate into bleary portrayals of cubes, to be possible as one looks on from a descendable view, over the shoulder, a zero-sum flame along a month-long reason's slackened tendon. Commerce, continued, conflated livelihoods, graveyards with middays remaining cooks. Bangs nearing the cumbersome line of singed eye roving uncorked, this corridor of preservation, the blue logic hard pressing the return key like hidden accelerant in my cup, darkening rose against the tissue of the foreground, panning against the withholding, the most unnatural of the raw materials, moving into the full circle for the first time, centering, we have to hold this up to her notes. In a street-like tide-wake walk against order, tending to the streamline, the peopled tree lines go 바글바글. The adverbial presence of the hooded, too interesting to populate with vectors. 자연보호. The amusement of the word becoming a cylinder, the dirigible we dreamed of being rescued from collides against the inside of the screen. It lifts off the suture, evacuating from white dust at no time of day in all other light. Thank you. Thank you. And now I'll introduce the next reader, who is Yubin Kang. Yubin Kang is a postdoctoral fellow at the School of Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell University. Kang received a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and holds a BA from Brown University and a BFA from the Rhode Island School of Design. Kang's work has been supported by the National Science Foundation and the Social Science Research Council and is in the process of being developed as a book project, Underground Labor and the Politics of Circuits. Please welcome Yubin. Thanks.
Hi everyone. Talk about the desire for legibility. I think today I thought a lot about Theresa Hak Kyung given the genocide happening in Gaza and how the trauma of war transcends. And so I'll be reading a little bit from the contribution I had in this volume. Thank you, Juan and Rachel, for your beautiful work. And then read some excerpts from Dictate. Death sparks spectacle. The contemporary militant and partisan labor movement in Korea began after the self-immolation of the garment worker Chun Tae-il, who died in November 1970 in the hustle and bustle of the garment district, crying out these words: "Follow the labor standards law, we are not machines. Let us have Sundays off. Don't exploit the workers, they are not machines." South Korea's economic development, induced by the sweated muscle of predominantly female garment workers, was a morbid affair. Yet without Chun Tae-il, his body aflame with the collective desire of workers toiling in the factories, there would be little recognition that garment workers were indeed beloved daughters. But when death is the tool for producing legibility, permission for the marginalized to be deserving of recognition, it is bound to complicate how the living consider their own bodies. This practice of sensationalized, pornographized invocation is anything if not revulsive, as is the idea that one must die to be granted dignity, to escape, to have purpose. Being who you are truly, to speak makes you sad, yearning. To utter each word is a privilege you risk by death. The anguished and fragmented cry of the marginalized to gain legibility signals to the concurrent desire for attaining visibility and invisibility from those who hold the gaze: the colonizer, the elite, the capitalist, the male, and the white. The marginalized might seek visibility in instrumental ways, through self-fetishization and self-tokenizing narratives, for instance, simply to borrow love and community, even if this love is superficial or transactional. At the same time, the marginalized are everywhere rendered invisible. Outsourced labor through global supply chains renders workers imperceptible to legal systems and consumers across borders, while the racialization of marginalized workers diminishes their value, justifying their dehumanized treatment. The marginalized also invisibilize themselves, whether through the uneasy attempt to assimilate and blend in, or through rebellious fugitive acts to escape the opportunistic reach of exploitation. Scholars have variously conceptualized the source of these desires as double consciousness, false consciousness, and misrecognition. Finally, view, this view. What is it finally? Finally seen. All seen, finally, again. Immediate, seen, all the time, over and over, again and again, seen and void of view, inside, outside, as if never. As if it was seen for the first time, it was the past. One is deceived, one was deceived of the view outside inside stained glass, opaque, reflects, never. Consequently, following the absent view, which has ceased to appear, already it has been without ever. This violence, often a desire for violence, runs through Cha's work and takes expressive form in the illegibility she produces. It is a haunted desire that is difficult to articulate simply in political, economic, or sociological terms, as Du Bois, Fanon, Althusser, or Bourdieu have done. Perhaps because it is embodied and complex in the same way that a proletarian revolution would never yield a single, simple resolution. It lies somewhere between the desire that the Christian woman saints, whose taboo, sensual longing for Christ is intended to transcend patriarchal oppression. Cha's employment of language to surpass the Japanese and American colonizers who undermined her ability to speak, and the shame of being alive in the midst of so much death and suffering. Dictée speaks to the audience at this intersection, one who understands that emancipation transcends the false duality of the personal and political and the liminality between life and death. All rise at once, one by one, voices absorbed into the bowl of sound. Rise, voices shifting upwards, circling the bowl's hollow. In deep metal, voice spiraling up, wards to pools, no visible light, lighter, no audible higher. Quicken, shiver, the air in pools waves, to raise all else were all memory, all echo. In vigilance of lifting the immobile silence, lift me to the window, to the picture image, unleash the ropes tied to weights of stones, first the ropes, then its scraping on wood, to break stillness as the bells fall, peal, follow the sound of ropes holding weight, scraping on wood, to break stillness, bells fall, appeal to sky. Cha's ghosts are summoned for the purpose of exorcism. Cha tells us that upon feeling through the frightening and melancholic conjuring of death, the body can disappear in a meditative trance. She rhythmically counts, recites, and lists until, with the help of her dead mother, we lift up, transcend, and finally perceive the weight of rocks, wood, and rope. The bells peal for what they are, words on paper. Thank you. I'm going to introduce Sariri Moses. Sariri Moses is an author and curator based in New York City. He's the author of several book chapters translated into 5 languages, and is the editor of Forces of Art, Perspectives from a Changing World, published by Valis in 2021. He currently serves as faculty in art history at Hunter College, CUNY, and has previously held teaching positions at New York University Center for Curatorial Studies, Bard College, New Center for Research and Practice, Dark Study, and Digital Earth Fellowship. He has organized exhibitions at MoMA PS1, Long Island City, Kunstwerk Institute for Contemporary Art Berlin, and the Hessel Museum, Bard College, New York. He serves on the editorial team of eFlux Journal.
Hi, everyone. This piece is one of the pieces that Theresa Hak Kyung wrote. It is a concrete poem called Black and Blue, and so it's about her grief. I need some help. Are there any volunteers? I would like a kind of rhythm while I'm reading. Anybody who wants to volunteer? Okay. It's very simple. I'm just, if you could just hum, basically, as a way of encouraging this foil around the grief. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Yeah, do you want to come as well? Yeah, you just have to hum. Yeah, yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, just, yeah. No, just, Oh, come closer, come closer. Harmony is fine. Black and blue, 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 black and blue. Thank you. Anton Hogan is a writer from Silicon Valley. He has previously published work with Rhizome, the Asia Art Archive in America, Codet, Arachne, and currently works as an editor for the arts, politics, and culture journal, The Reservoir, published by Woodbine and Autonomedia. He's currently working on a novel.
How's it going? Can you hear me okay? It's really an honor to be here. How to silence on apparatus and dictate. Systematic overthrow of the underclass. Hollywood conjures images of the past. Alluding to a curative path from his diagnosis of technology's effect on society, Martin Heidegger concludes his question concerning technology with a couplet by Friedrich Hölderlin. But where danger is, grows the saving power also. The text suggests the saving power is found not in technology's rejection, but within and through its dangers. Two branches appear on this path as limits to a spectrum. One where technological evaluation is exclusively embodied, and another in which these values are held at objective distance. Namjoon Paik's series TV Buddha evokes the latter by positioning a statue of Buddha before a camera and television that displays the statue's real-time image. Buddha's enlightenment thus becomes an ideal of spectatorship, an existence both in and outside the floating world of technological reflection. The work of Theresa Hak Kyung, however, problematizes this ideal. The silence of spectatorship is less akin to enlightenment than to death. Cha's editorship of the film theory reader, Apparatus, presents a critique of technological interpolation that inverts TV Buddha. Within the reader's paratextual choices lurks the idea of a spectral double, a ghost-like manifestation of intimate fantasy that obscures and calcifies the present. Throughout Apparatus, Cha strews recontextualizations of proto-cinematic quotations. Plato's allegory of the cave and Diderot's Enlightenment revision lead to a fiction by Apollinaire depicting desire-based image addiction. An excerpt from Balzac's Cousin Pons suggests that just as the daguerreotype extracts from the soul, the future can be gleaned from history's traces. Of these quotations, the last and longest is also the most glaringly uncinematic. In the excerpt from Henry James's Jolly Corner, the protagonist faints when he is confronted by a materialization of an imagined self, born from his fantasy of an alternate life. In place of textual commentary, Cha employs small, centered images throughout the reader. To introduce Jean-Louis Baudry's essay, Apparatus, a lithograph demonstrates Pepper's ghost, an effect in which, through projection, an offstage actor appears as an onstage apparition. Although stills from Carl Theodor Dreyer's Vampire famously encircled Cha's own contribution, Commentaire, the Vampire makes its first appearance at the conclusion of Apparatus's initial essay, implying a larger paratextual thread. Commentaire reduces cinema to its Manichaean essence with rhythmic black and white pages on which the title is mechanistically deconstructed alongside allusions to time's passage. At the climax of Vampire, the hero faints and dreams. He walks as a spirit through an alternate timeline, a future in which he has failed. He sees his own body, a corpse, and the film assumes its perspective. Commentaire disrupts the design of Apparatus with a full-page photograph from this vantage, depicting the vampire staring into the camera to the spectator and the viewer and the reader. The poem concludes with the corpse's returning gaze. Two other photographs situate the poem's use of black and white pages, a time-lapse of a drive-in and another of a cinema. Through extended exposure, the projected films are reduced to an ominous white. In the latter's foreground, a moviegoer sleeps across balcony seats, held by the specter of his own hand. In Dicte, cinema's capacity to immobilize bodies through the mediation of history becomes the paralysis brought on by post-colonial trauma. Cleo history depicts Yu Guansun reciting the name of Joan d'Arc 3 times, but this Joan, and thus you, are later subsumed in the novel by Dreyer's image of the weeping martyr. In an attempt to rectify this erasure, Cleo contrasts Yu's martyrdom with those found in film. Time fixes for some. Their image, the memory of them, is given not to deterioration, unlike the captured image that extracts from the soul precisely by reproducing, multiplying itself. Their countenance evokes not the hollowed beauty, beauty from seasonal decay, evokes not the inevitable, not death, but the dying. Like the Christian Metz critique featured in Apparatus, which concerns communal wish fulfillment in cinema's willful sleep, to describe a session of film viewing, Cha opts for the French séance, a word that in English refers only to contacting the dead. The novel, however, detorns Metz's theories on willful immobilization by juxtaposing them to a map of divided Korea. Cinema's dream thus becomes the seductive recursion of post-traumatic alienation, the illusion that the act of viewing is to make alteration of the visible. A vital import is to name it now so as not to repeat history in oblivion. Thank you. Valentina Jager is a visual artist, writer, and translator. She earned her PhD at the University of Texas, her PhD in creative writing in Spanish at the University of Texas, Houston, and currently resides on an island in the Gulf of Mexico with her cats, surrounded by refineries and mutant fish. Let's give it up for Valentina.
Thank you, Anton, for memorizing that. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Yubin, for making this happen, and everyone here. So what I miss mentioning in that biography is that my day job is as a Spanish language teacher. That's how I pay my bills and eat and etc. And I teach at the Hispanic Serving University, where a large percentage of the students receive formal education in a language other than their mother tongue. Like in New York, for example, the language of instruction is English, but that is not necessarily the language being spoken at home. For example, even though I teach Spanish as a second language, many of my students are heritage learners of first and second generation, and Spanish is not really a second language, but a language that already belongs to them. This is why this day, for this presentation, this day job is relevant, because these topics were already part of my day-to-day life when a friend suggested I read dictée many years ago, which eventually led me to want to translate it into Spanish. And I will proceed to read an excerpt in a minute of that translation. So we know that Spanish is, as well as English, a colonizing language. We know about the role translation played with the Spanish missionaries in the process of colonization, and the role that language acquisition has nowadays in acculturation and assimilation. Yet, in the context that I work and I teach, regardless of contextual proficiency, Spanish belongs to these students. It's not the language of the institution, even though it's a Hispanic serving institution. And my job is to teach them the grammar of their mother's tongue, or even though that tongue has already a grammar of its own, or the grammar of their mother's mother tongue. So when I confronted myself with the task of translating dictée, I chose to put myself through a similar process to that of language acquisition and void myself of self. And by voiding myself, I could allow the work of Theresa Hak Kyung to possess me. And I don't mean possession in the sense of property, but as in spiritual possession, so that I could make and take decisions from that point, and for example, prioritize grammar to keep a strangeness also in the Spanish version. I care particularly for the use of the conditional clauses, which we use to say that one thing depends on something else, and to keep these conditional clauses next to the simple present tense or present indefinite. So, for example, from dictée, since she hesitates to measure the accuracy, she resorts to mimicking gestures with the mouth. That is simple present or indefinite, where an action happens right now and or regularly. And then from the book again, she would take on their punctuation. She would become herself demarcations. This would is the second conditional, which is used to mean a hypothetical possibility. It can be used to talk about something that might happen or might have happened as a result of another action. It expresses a desire that might or might never become. So having one side by side, the indefinite present and the conditional clauses accentuates a desire. So now I will read an excerpt from the translation from page 3, which is the section of the thesis. Ella imita la dicción, que pareciera el habla, o cualquier cosa. Ruido desnudo, gemido, pedazos rasgados de palabras. Como vacila a medir la precisión, ella recurre a imitar gestos con la boca. El labio inferior se elevaría por completo para después hundirse en su lugar original. Ella luego juntaría los labios en un puchero, aspirando el aliento que podría pronunciar un algo. Una cosa, solo una. Pero el aliento mengua. Con una ligera inclinación hacia atrás de la cabeza, ella reuniría la fuerza en sus hombros y permanecería en esta posición. Murmura por dentro, eso murmura. Dentro está el dolor del habla, el dolor de decir. Más grande aún. Mayor al dolor de no decir. No decir. Dice nada en contra del dolor de hablar. Supura por dentro. La herida, líquido, polvo. Debe romper, debe vaciar. Ella libera sus hombros desde el cuello. Pasa saliva una vez más. Una vez más, con una masa suficiente. En preparación. Aumenta. A un tono tal, perdón. Un zumbido interminable, en acople, autónomo, autogenerativo. Traga con los últimos esfuerzos, las últimas voluntades contra el dolor de decir. So I'm going to stop there. And I'm going to introduce the following readers. So the following readers are Tellen, Tran, and Yubin. Tellen, Tran, I hope I'm I'm saying your name right? Good. It's a writer from Orange, California, or Gabrieleño Tonguel land. They write about home and interstitial fate via several mediums such as fiction, poetry, film, and ultimately the browser. Tellen works as the membership and community engagement coordinator at Wendy's Subway. They also work with Mekong New York City, a Southeast Asian grassroots organization in the Bronx. Tellen's words can be found in Amulet, a journal of poetics, Social Text Online, No, Dear Magazine, Out of the Margins, and more. Tellen's first poetry chapbook is Ad Hoc from 2023. And also I'm introducing Yubin Yuen, who is a Vietnamese queer disabled abolitionist organizer and cultural worker currently organizing with Red Canary Song and Survive and Punish New York. And formerly with Freedom All for Public Health. They are personally concerned with supporting survivors of all forms of violence through organizing and informal community support. They have experience supporting sex workers, migrant workers, and survivors of gender-based violence, particularly criminalized survivors of abuse. Welcome.
So, should write this down so I can hear you. Is this good? Could you say something?
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you to my coworkers at Wendy's. I love reading with you and other things. And thank you to the Poetry Project. Yeah, I'm gonna have Yves start us off.
First, thank you so much for including me within this space. My contribution to this reader came from being asked by Wendy Subway to be a part of the Memory and Migration Embodied Histories workshop alongside Jennifer Kwan Dobbs and Brandon Shimoda, both of whom I'm sad cannot be here today, and both of whom are poets and writers by trade, which I am not. Both in that workshop and in this adapted interview with Tien and I worked on as an organizer who organizes around migration, labor, and criminalization, I sought to address and question Theresa Hak Kyung's relationship to liberal academic and art institutions, material struggle, and political movements, and how she is remembered. And we're coming to this space 7 months into an ongoing and escalating genocide on Palestinians that started decades ago, and watching as students all over the city are being assaulted, expelled, and incarcerated by the NYPD at the behest of the institutions meant to teach them for fighting against that genocide. And we're years into a COVID pandemic that is still killing and disabling people as we watch these students get masks ripped from their faces. I felt that I had to ask the writers, artists, and cultural workers in this room and a part of this broader community to think about their relationships to political struggles for freedom through my own practice. For me, as a person who is here as a result of colonization, imperialism, and migration, and organizes around migration, it's important to understand our relationship to land and acknowledge the land that we're occupying. We're currently holding this event on Munsee Lenape land and reside on the territory of the Lenni Lenape called Lenape Hogan, which encompasses land surrounding the Delaware, Hudson, Lehigh, and Schuylkill River watersheds, now known as parts of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. There are still Lenape people who are fighting for their lives and their land today. Whenever I do a land acknowledgement, I give money to the Nantichoke Lenni Lenape tribal nation who currently reside in New Jersey, and I ask that others who are able to join me. Their PayPal is paypal.me/NLL honorarium. It's important to me to materially support struggle, not just name it, invoke it, or excavate from it for creative, intellectual, and personal pursuit. I hope that Tien and I's contribution today and in the reader opens up space for us all to question our practices and commitment to liberation for all colonized, dispossessed, and oppressed people.
Thanks, Yves. I have a little printout of their PayPal here. I'm going to tuck it in my copy of the book. If you want to pay cash, you can tuck some cash in my book. And I'm going to pass around my book throughout the evening. If it exceeds our talk, you can give it back to me in the front row. So I'll start it down here. So we have 2 images projected, and I will read the caption for both of them. On the left, we have Theresa Hak Kyung's performance piece, Able Whale, or maybe Able Whale, performed at Worth Writer Gallery at UC Berkeley in 1975. And on the right, we have Red Canary Song's installation for the 8 Lives Vigil in Washington Square Park on March 16th, 2022. So our piece in the book was an interview, and it didn't really make sense to come up here and just read our conversation. So we decided to take a piece from the text, which is the side-by-side of these 2 installations, and talk about that. Our interview as a whole kind of talks about memorials and martyrship, and ultimately what happens when we represent. In this case, we're talking about Asian migrant women and the representation of their murder. Sometimes it's a flattening of such, sometimes it's an honoring of such, and how do we kind of mark that tension in our work as artists and activists and poets and scholars and just people in the world that experience grief and death and performance every day. Kind of a funny fact was we made the connection of these similarities many, many months after the interview between me and Yves, or conversation between Yves and I. And so I think that sort of speaks for itself. I want to read a little bit of Cha's words herself and her notes when performing this piece, which is actually made and shown side by side with Mouth to Mouth, which was one of her film pieces shown also in Berkeley in 1975. She writes, "In this piece, I want to be the dream of the audience. An environment, a curtain made from cheesecloth was hung, separating the performer's space and that of the viewer. The effect on the viewing of the performance is that of seeing through opaque transparency. Inside the performer's space are lighted candles, also reflected by pieces of mirror placed behind them, creating an oval-shaped area. The performer is wearing a white robe and 20 meters of black and red cloth underneath. The movements," yeah, we don't get to see that in the image because it's black and white. Anyway, "the movements performed are divided into spaces that contain movement and space that are still. The sound and time are also divided into sound-silent parts. Movement is similar to dance." So with that, I'll go with a question to Yves about their installation with members from Red Canary Song for the 8 Lives Vigil. How about you contextualize the piece and perhaps think of the questions? How does the memorial function as an engagement between organizers and the dead? What practices did you bring to the piece from your own life? And what sort of questions did you ask yourselves within the collective? How might this relate to Cha and refer to her pieces, her performances, her life, and her death as an artist, as well as the systemic violence that all migrant women face?
So this is a very large question that I could talk about forever and ever, but I want to address the images that you're looking at behind you, and the funny thing that Tien brought up about how we found out that these images looked very similar while working on this, not in the process. We weren't met with these images before we started the process of my workshop or the interview that was in this book. Rather, it seems that by pure coincidence and accident, Theresa and the members of RCS kind of had aesthetic similarities and pulled from similar places in these pieces. And for us at Red Canary Song, the reason why our memorial looks like this is first that this is a memorial art piece that was made for the 8 lives that were lost in the massage business shootings in Atlanta. And we wanted to bring in a lot of different pieces, both from our organizing history, our history as folks who create these art installations and these vigils and memorials for people to hold grief, but also the sort of culture of massage businesses. These curtains are the same curtains that certain massage workers use in their massage businesses in Flushing, Queens, and in other places. It's their own aesthetic that they've created from time of being here, of being migrants, and creating their businesses and trying to create a certain aesthetic to both invite people in and to show who they are without necessarily always like saying that on the business. And we also included paintings that you can't actually see from that image that were done by a Korean massage worker. They are oil paintings of the eyes of the 8 victims of the massage shooting. And we wanted them to be eyes, and we wanted them to be placed at eye level so that people could look into the eyes of those victims, could feel a personhood with it. And then the last part is those massage beds that we've turned into altars. Different members of Red Canary Song have different religious and spiritual practices that have become incorporated into the symbology of our work. But the massage bed is also incorporated via the work that we do. And so we've turned these massage beds into altar spaces, something that's sacred, something that's personal, something to hold grief, that brings in both the labor that we do and that type of sacred religious and spiritual practice. And it's a little bit difficult because I think that there are members, probably not me, but there are members of RCS who consider themselves to also be artists and organizers who put together this exhibition, other exhibitions, other types of placemaking, memorial making, that I think people often separate their relationship as an organizer and as an artist, or there are people who separate their identity as an artist and a massage worker and what people choose to see of them first. And beyond that, I think that there are a lot of differences between Theresa Hak Kyung and those victims in Atlanta and other massage workers who have been murdered via police violence or by white supremacist violence all the same, such that of Yang Song, who Red Canary Song is named after. There were a lot of comparisons that are made between Theresa and a lot of different migrant massage workers who have faced violence. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic environment and the conversations around anti-Asian racism and violence, Theresa's name was often brought up because of the violent nature of her death and in comparison to these massage workers, right? They think, oh, she's also a migrant Asian woman, so they're very similar, but they're not. And so when I came both into this chapter and in talking about our practices, it was important to discuss both their similarities and the differences of their lives and their death, and my personal discomfort with the flattening of their identities and of all of our identities.
Thank you. Yves and I could talk for a really long time because we're friends, and this is a really abundant and full topic. But I know that the performances themselves speak for so much, and seeing them side by side and understanding the sort of violences that hit all of us, if you're a bourgeoisie artist, if you're a migrant worker, if you're a sex worker, they're here and they're present, and you can feel the grief in the performances and the bodies themselves. And I wanted to close that with a quote actually from Yves from her interview that you can read, but yeah, I'll read it. You want Cha to be remembered, you want her to be talked about, and you want to ask certain questions about her death. And I would ask whether the way you do it achieves your goals. We all have different goals, values, and principles, so it requires some personal reflection. But if the goal is for white supremacist violence or gender-based violence to end, legitimating crime data and narratives around crime waves is not going to do it. That's a question that we ask ourselves in Red Canary's song. Are we in alignment with our values and goals? We've built memorials, we've built physical art installations. It's part of what we do to varying degrees. The most recent one people often think of is the memorial and art installation we created in honor of the 8 people, Delana Ashley Yan, Xiaoxi Tan, Dayao Feng, Paul Andre Michaels, Hyunjung Grant, Soonchung Park, Suncha Kim, Yang-ae Yu, who were killed in the Atlanta spa shootings. In this art installation, we built massage beds that took the shape of ancestral altars and were built by massage workers in our collective, Lisa, Charlotte, Lynn, and other members. We were very intentional with how we built it, what we used to build it, and the items we placed on it. When you start talking about someone like Cha, you inscribe certain things into the collective memory of someone's death. That is very much the work of memorialization, even when you are not physically building a memorial. You are building something material that lives alongside memory. Thank you. I'm very happy to introduce us to the next speaker, Saang Yun. Saang Yun is the program director and assistant professor of art history and visual studies at the New School. She was also a faculty at the Whitney Museum of American Art's Independent Study Program from 2012 to 2023. Yun's research focuses on politics of mobility and rhetorics of testimony, witnessing, and storytelling and the moving image. Yun is currently at work on 2 book projects, Walkie Talkie and TV Buddhas. A new book on the mattress as an artistic motif, A Mattress is Not a Bed, is in production. Welcome.
Can you hear me? Okay. First Friday, 1 hour before Mass. Mass every first Friday, dictate first every Friday before a Mass, dictate before. Back in the study hall, it is time. Snaps once, 1 step right from the desk, single file, snaps twice. Follow single line, move all the way to the right-hand side of the wall, single file. The sound instrument is made from 2 pieces of flat box-shaped wood with a hinge at the center. It rests inside the palm and is snapped with a defined closing of the thumb. Passions still run high, we are told, about the pedagogical necessity of the dictee, whereby the student must write down literary passages that the teacher reads aloud, a daily spelling and grammar test that has been implemented in French elementary classrooms since the 19th century. The difficulty of the French dictation test and its reputation as a thing of dread, not so much an excuse, not so much as an exercise, as a rite of initiation, are due in part to how much spelling and grammar are intertwined in the French language. Correct spelling of a word is contingent upon comprehending its meaning in the context of the selected passage. Reporting in the 1980s on the cultural phenomena of the then new national dictate contests, the journalist Stanley Meisler, foreign correspondent for the Los Angeles Times, notes how the particularities of the French language turns the dictate into a puzzle, even a trap. He cites the scandal of Prosper Mérimée diabolic dictée for the court of Napoleon III in 1868. The emperor made 45 mistakes, as well as the televised national finals in 1986, watched by millions with both bated breath and pencil and paper in hand, where, quote, contestants could not figure out how to spell one adjective pronoun in the first sentence until discovering 6 lines later that the person talked about was a woman, end quote. And as much as the dictee is a source of dread, it also produces shame, a singular and intense shame about the bad spelling of one's mother tongue. As Theresa Hak Kyung's dictee suggests, it is an experience of shame akin to the rite of confession. The opening chapter of Cha's book moves back and forth from the calls and responses of French language exercises to that of Catholic rites of Mass, which seek to interpolate the individual, shaping her body, her mouth, her lips, her throat, her breath, and her mind, her fitful experience herself as a self into the subject who speaks. Question, who made thee? Answer, God made me to conspire in God's tongue. The subject does not so much speak as is spoken. Through the discipline of the dictée, there is a particular effort to harmonize the French tongue and ear, the rhythms of the printed word and the flow of handwriting, the literary and the bureaucratic, the public and the private, into one seamless flow of the mother tongue. The first dictées were administered as tests for civil servants until Napoleon I. The dictée would enter classrooms a few years later as a tool for shaping, standardizing, and nationalizing the French language amid highly politicized attempts to modernize the French education system, the state battling with the Catholic Church over the control and reach of public education. The dictée then could be described as one of the cultural techniques that the media theorist Friedrich Kittler claimed as constituting the discourse network of the 1800s. Changes in the practices of language acquisition tied to bureaucratic reform, which were part and parcel of the changes in the formation of the family and the nation state, the divisions of labor across private and public spheres, according to which women were inscribed within the private sphere of the family as the primary caregivers and teachers of children, i.e. mothers. Mothers would then teach children how to speak, and more importantly, the desire to speak, recoding the noise of the child's babble as that which could be interpreted as the nascent speech of an inner voice, a soul, or a spirit. Language would be perceived as deriving from the desire of and for an originary orality, the mother's voice. And when later in life children picked up a book, Kittler adds, they would not see letters, but hear, with irrepressible longing, a voice between the lines. We are dealing with nothing less than the discursive construction, Jeffrey Winthrop Young encapsulates, of that particular type of intimate, eroticized motherhood, which 100 years later will be excavated by Sigmund Freud and presented as a near universal constant. Through the dictée, we will learn not only a language, but also, quote unquote, the mother tongue. Just skip. Back to Cha's dictée. Question, who made thee? Answer, God made me to conspire in God's tongue. Question, where is God? Answer, God is everywhere, accomplice in his text, the fabrication in his own image, the pleasure, the desire of giving image to the word and the mind of the confessor. Question, God who has made you in his own likeness. Answer, God who has made me in his own likeness, in his own image, in his own resemblance, in his own copy, in his own counterfeit presentment, in his duplicate, in his own reproduction, in his cast, in his carbon, his image, and his mirror. Pleasure in the image, pleasure in the copy, pleasure in the projection of likeness, pleasure in repetition. Acquiesce to the correspondence, acquiesce to the messenger, acquiesce to and for the conspiracy in the hieratic tongue, theirs into their tongue, the counterscript, my confession in theirs, into theirs, to scribe, to make hear the words, to make sound the words, the words, the words made flesh. Confession here in Cha's dictée becomes a matter of editing, of image-sound relations, of matching image to sound, of selecting from a possible array of images the right image to the sound to the word. There is the play of free association in relationship to the word likeness. What would such a likeness be? Is it like a cast, as in the pouring of metal into mold? Is it a carbon, as in the pressing of pigment into paper? Is it a mirror, as in the reflection and refraction of light? How is a word made flesh? And amid this free association, as he becomes them, there is not only pleasure in excess of the discipline of confession, but also distraction and an excessive play of words. There is poetry, there is noise, there is babble. Thank you. So I'd like to present the speaker after me, so Chuan Chu. Chuan Chu is an artist based in New York. She has shown work with Gyeonggi Museum of Modern Art, RISD Museum, Brooklyn Women's Film Festival, La Femme Underground Film Festival, Anthology Film Archives, and more. She is an associate editor at Wendy's Subway. Her writing has appeared in Offshoot. Thank you.
Hello again. So I also contributed a short piece to the book, and it is about my grandmother, who I grew up with. She was my main caretaker in Korea, and she grew up at the height of Japanese colonization in Korea, and went through the Korean War as a teenager. And I grew up hearing a lot of stories about her childhood, as I'm sure many people do. Okay. On stones. Abstract is their verb, as in, they abstract her humanity. When her life, just as mine, is material. Start foremost from our bodies, from a particular hunger or feeling, as in, what will we eat today? As in, there is a pain in my knee. As in, you've grown so unfamiliar. She narrates her childhood to me. This is a familiar scene. We sit facing each other at the dining table. She was born during colonial rule. To speak your own tongue was forbidden. She remembers pissing herself in the classroom because the teacher forbade her from using the bathroom. They hit her until her limbs burst. There is no space for reason, other than the simple fact that her body was there, ready to be disciplined. Palms and wooden sticks, these are the materials of her memory. She is 11 here. Her name is Kurimoto, a surname given by the Japanese Empire. When the war came, she left her hometown with the 70 families in her village. Her days were punctuated by its composition: bombs, rifles, ships, tanks, American soldiers, and bullets. Her ears remember their sounds, her skin their textures, and her eyes the sheen and the violence. She would ask for a bowl of rice from soldiers nearby. They would ask her to sing them a song. So she would sing for the soldiers and earn a single bowl back to the families. Her mother would make porridge from that bowl. They would each take a spoonful. She is 14. She walks the bare land with her mother. Stones tumble at their feet. She asks her mother why there are so many of them, the round, tumbling stones. They cover every surface of this land. Foolish child, these are skulls. How do you walk the land? How have we become your stones? In class, I am asked to dance like a heavy stone. I picture the skulls tumbling on the land she once walked. I curl up on the floor. I let my body roll across the floor in slow motion. From the shoulder to the shoulder blade to the surface of my back, the floor travels down my spine. I am upside down. I cannot get the image out of my head, so I enact her stones. Sometimes objects find themselves in our bodies, how memories do. Language finds a way into a moving body. It confronts a memory that is not mine, then a feather. Abstract is my noun, a violence done unto you, hardened by the cruel passing of time. Like your stones and the traces of mine, yet, like all expressions, abstraction cannot forgo the material. It mourns its loss even louder through the obscuring. I once observed you bent over the kitchen sink, your body curled forward. Fine creases formed at every fold, from your neck to your fingers, your knees and ankles. You wore a black dress that draped down to your swollen ankles over your figure. Polyester with prints of bright pink and green imitating flowers. You were a mountain, burnt to its surface, exposing its dark earth, miraculous flowers decorating its bare skin. I built you out of the stones you gave me. I stacked them into a mound. What does that make you? A mountain, a grave, a young girl. I could stack them into a body, not yours nor mine. I write you as a reminder. I recite only these words. Let us be undone from this fantasy. Let me be undone from theirs. Let me be unrecognizable to the self. Let these stones unmake this body. Let these stones unmake them. Thank you. So I'll introduce the next reader, who is Irene Shu. Irene Shu is a writer and researcher based in Brooklyn. Their writings and conversations are homed in the Asian American Writers Workshop, Brooklyn Rail, Fruit Journal, and Mixed Rice Zines, among others. At their day job at CAAAV, Organizing Asian Communities, they build storytelling and media strategy to fight real estate propaganda and grow the leadership of working class and immigrant tenants. Please welcome Irene.
Hi, everyone. Today, I'm going to read from an essay about Secret Spill, which is a 30-minute long tapes performance, where Theresa is digging a sack of soil with her bare hands, and she's pulling out handfuls of dirt for about 30 minutes. This performance is both conceptual and very sensorial. I'm going with my gut to say it's a piece concerned with militarization. Theresa wrote and made art in exile from a divided and occupied Korea. Our reading takes place more than 200 days after the start of the Al-Aqsa flood, amid Palestinian resistance against Zionist occupation and genocide. My essay is dedicated to my friend, Anthony Viasna-So, who wrote to make sense of Khmer life in Stockton, California, against the death-making machine of US empire and the Khmer Rouge genocide. Anthony also had a zany sense of humor. In one of our last conversations before he died in 2020, he told me about an essay he wanted to write for GQ magazine about Theresa's fashion style, which happens to be very similar to Steve Jobs' fashion style. This essay is not that, unfortunately, but it is still in his memory. So yeah, I just wanted to frame this essay and Theresa's work. The US empire is desperate and it's dying. From its ruins, we're making our lives. And from its ruins, may our resistance rise. And now for the essay, the actual essay, which starts on page 265, if you have the anthology and want to follow along. Okay. And it's called Playing in the Dirt, Feeling Around in the Dark. For the motion-sick viewer, there is no way to watch Secret Spill except with your eyes slightly unfocused, like getting through the day with a bad migraine. Soil, stone, sack. It is no accident that over half of the film dwells on shape-shifting matter through close-ups so shaky that they nauseate. The way a curious creature makes an improbable home out of debris, the camera pokes around in the dirt, nosing tufts of weed, root, and string. This project of homemaking is no neoliberal practice of consumptive self-care. After all, there is nothing easy about hospitality when it involves making do amid inhospitable conditions. As the inquisitive camera probes shifting in and out of focus, the video reminds us that seeing out of focus is hardly the same as being out of it. To be out of it is to be elsewhere, while the world passes you by. To see out of focus is to be swept up in the world in all its horror and glory, but with a soft touch. Mired in the mud of the world, Secret Spill is very much invested in the soft touch of the latter. Playing in the dirt necessitates a shift from sight to touch, and it is this metamorphosis of the visual into the tactile that constitutes the video's haptic experience. In approaching the abject, hapticality becomes a key aesthetic strategy, one that compels us to attend to how curiosity and dread build up in our bodies as somatic excess. This is the tension that Cha sets up. We are at once the active subjects of the film, scooping soil like a child playing in a garden, as well as the viewers subjected to the frame, sitting tight with churning stomachs. If the cloth lump is a symbol for the sum of affective experiences cemented in the body through colonial violence, then Cha's video performs curiosity as a tool to abide by the self-made strange, the home of a body made unhomely. In grappling with the density of ugly feelings materialized and metabolized in the body, Anne Chang's insights on repair to racialized objecthood are instructive. She writes in Ornamentalism, self-regard delineates an approach back toward the self as a collection of lost objects. Having been made stranger to oneself by unimaginable brutality means that one must reapproach the self as a stranger. By invoking the body as an archive, Chang highlights the felt sense that exists below the threshold of colonial imagination and knowledge production. And by calling upon self-regard as a practice of repair, Chang highlights the lived experiences that escape the archive, the master's house. It makes possible a reading of Secret Spill as a performance that rebuilds the home of oneself through the intimate destruction of falling apart, using one's bare hands to pry oneself loose from what Fanon has called colonialism's arsenal of complexes, so as to feel out and forge a world according to terms that do not demand alienation from your lived experiences. It is apt that Fanon metaphorizes colonialism's psychoaffective dimensions through the arsenal, through military technology targeting body and land. Ultimately, the body's relationship to land bears the scars of imperial warfare, which manifests in ideology and infrastructure, ecology and economy, attrition and aggression. Secret Spill makes perceptive this affective structure that is emergent from military infrastructure, tethering those exiled from a divided and occupied homeland to those making their livelihoods in land intended for waste by herbicidal warfare, uncleared explosives, and militarized borders. When dirt spills onto dirt, the performance of excavation in Secret Spill yokes the objection of the body to the abjection of the earth. Decomposing remains, fossilized inheritances, substance broken down, an interior in ruins yearns and hearkens to the ruins that lie beyond. Fanon has said this about the project of decolonization. The militant is therefore one who works. To work means to work toward the death of the colonist. The work that the militant takes up with hardened hands, their muscles, their whole heart, is as much a psychoaffective process as it is physical and material in search of a way back toward the self. And as the arduous object study of secret spill suggests, the way back demands no less than an excavation of the decomposition within, no less than sifting the rubble and searching the ruins beyond, no less than digging deep, feeling around in the dark, easy as they come and gentle as can be. Thank you. And now I will introduce the next two. So Flo Lee is an artist, writer, and art worker from Hong Kong. She's interested in using art and media to explore memory and grief. And Marian Chudanovsky is an archivist and art worker from Queens, New York. She is a librarian at Wendy's Subway and works at other cultural organizations like the Center for Art Research and Alliances, and her work focuses on expanded ideas of memory, upkeep, and documentation.
Hi, everyone. Before we start, we just wanted to say thank you so much to Rachel and Juan. All of your hard work and your care is so meaningful to us.
And to everyone who made our year of programming around This Quick and the Dead so special, and always to the team at Wendy's. We're so honored to do this with you all.
The slanted door opens. A warm breeze shuffles through. His tense shoulders soften as each foot steps in front of the other. His hand no longer clenches, his fingers move freely, and his skin runs smooth. His footsteps remain soft. A slow sigh ripples. He is impatient. The sun spills forth and casts a hazy glow. The low refrigerator hum drones on. The cars whisper abruptly, quietening as they drive past. The dust dances in the light. His fingers drum the table. They twinkle. He sighs knowingly. He glances at his watch. Late again, I inhale the broadcast.
I heard the rain does not erase the blood fallen on the ground. I heard from the adults the blood stains still. Year after year it rained. The stone pavement stained where you fell still remains dark.
Sunday night. She sits on the sofa waiting for the clock to turn. She takes the phone and dials, punching numbers into a keypad. What a spread awaits. How many days, how many years, how many months? I have lost count and I don't want to know. What is grief if not the attempt to breathe life into memory?
How do I hold you, my dead?
We were in the park. I was grasping onto a blunt blade of grass. Taking turns standing watch, I kept averting my gaze to ward off onlookers. As I licked my finger, the wind wavered. The wooden urn creaked open. Burying under my nail, the ash affixed itself. I swallowed. What does it mean for me to carry a drop of you inside of me? I think of you tumbling through my body, sliding down each intestine, memory, crevice. Do you turn each over like a stone? A trace remains forever imprinted somewhere in my bloodstream.
There is a theory of creation often cited in Kabbalah, which propounds that the universe was created through God's withdrawal, a kind of exile, leaving behind infinite light and space for the universe. The light is the condition for our existence, and yet there is a haunting in the wake of creation. We are left wondering always how to repair the world, where God is, what to do with all this light.
Breaking into grief like I am breaking into new shoes. There was no burial, just a return to the elements. When I step onto the ground, there is minimal buoyancy. I search for resonance. I know you are all around, but my footsteps find only the damp.
Define martyr. Write for me what it is to save thousands, their stories held on the back of our imagination of a boy with a scrape. When he saves thousands, they hold him with them always, an unintentional and inescapable lifeline, as if somehow his death was worth it, divinely ordained.
The ocean washes out. as if there is a galaxy awaiting. But what do the waves contain? I want to know, but I'm afraid I might spill out. And you are here, buoyant and resplendent. The smile breaks and the ashes blow away. This is a neat reminder. I exhale the broadcast.
What if you still held me while I practiced?
I write you daily from here. I write through to you. A billow of memory splits like smoke and a tunnel shoots through. I write through me, my hand extended. Are you still seated? Can you see my still reach? We crest gently, and I wonder if your ears still fold like butter. If your fingers still clench, I can feel your arrivals too. Your laugh still trails silently.
The stone pavement stained where you fell still remains dark.
The rust creaks at the door hinge. Metal oxidizes over time. It becomes brittle. We too oxidize and creak. But the creek runs pebbles smooth, and they tumble along a bed. I don't think this will ever be polished. I will always feel a molten compression. Writing you creates an open valve, cools the wet flame, and encourages me to swallow slowly. Your ash trails in my body, slinking, careening, gliding.
We glide across the wind together, over the Unisphere, towards the ocean. Maybe we'll head to Rockaway, dream big, go to Riverhead, say hi to Grandma. We will let the wind buoy us, and there will be nothing to do but laugh. Let it tickle.
In the ocean at last. Will I see you later? I write you always. You write me always. From here, from there, awaiting. Our final performer tonight is Andrew Young-hoon Lee.
Andrew Young-hoon Lee is an artist working in performance, music, sound, drawing, text, and video, exploring themes of memory, movement, and distance. Recent exhibitions include Stalige Kunsthal, Baden-Baden, Hall Gallery, Brooklyn, Parent Gallery, Brooklyn, Katarina Jeffries, Vancouver, Friedman Gallery, New York, New York Artist Residency Foundation, Achtung Cinema, Paris, Kinoscope International Analog Film Festival, Belgrade, Mono Noah Ware Festival of Cinema Arts, Brooklyn, and the Vancouver Art Gallery. Thank you.
Thank you all so much, incredibly so much, for being here, for reading, for performing, for bringing so much healing into this space. The book is available. I have to be a little bit of a salesperson. Please get the book. There's so many incredible contributions from all the readers you heard tonight, but also from many others. And we're just so grateful that you have spent the evening with us and shared the space with us, and hope that you read the book. If you are a contributor to the book and we didn't see you at the beginning, and you didn't get your copies yet, please come find us. Thank you all so much for being here. Good night.